The old man's cane clattered against the subway floor before Megan Walsh even registered the shove that caused it. "Move it, Gramps," the young man snapped, shoving past him toward an empty seat, loud enough that half the car turned to look. "Some of us actually have places to be." Megan's son Tommy, 4 years old and exhausted from daycare, stirred against her shoulder but didn't wake. She'd been riding the T home from her shift for 6 stops already, bone-tired in the particular way that came from 12 hours on her feet, and every instinct told her to keep her head down and let the moment pass. He didn't. She stood, shifting Tommy carefully onto her hip, and put herself between the elderly man and the young stranger still glaring at him with contempt. "He's not moving fast enough for your taste," Megan said, voice carrying clearly through the subway car. "So you decided shoving him was reasonable?" "Mind your business," the man said, sneering. "This is my business," Megan said. "You just knocked an old man's cane out from under him in front of a car full of witnesses. That's not something I'm going to quietly watch." The car had gone fully silent now, passengers watching with the particular tense curiosity of people grateful someone else was handling the confrontation. The young man's bravado wavered under the weight of 24 pairs of eyes. "Whatever," he muttered and got off at the next stop without looking back. Megan knelt to retrieve the elderly man's cane, handing it back to him gently. "Are you all right?" "Shaken more than hurt," he said, settling carefully into the now empty seat, his hands trembling slightly around the cane's handle. "Thank you." Tui. Most people would have looked away. "I don't look away," Megan said simply, adjusting Tommy against her hip. The old man studied her with unexpected intensity, something searching in his expression that went beyond simple gratitude. "What's your name?" "Megan." "Thank you, Megan," he said, like the words carried more weight than the sentence itself. He got off 2 stops later, and Megan thought nothing more of the encounter until she noticed, glancing out the window as her own train pulled through his station moments later, a sleek black car idling at the curb outside, a driver already opening the rear door for the elderly man, waiting with the kind of practiced attentiveness that didn't belong to an ordinary retiree's evening commute. Megan's stomach tightened with unplaceable unease, though she had no way yet of understanding why. She thought about it on and off for the rest of the evening, feeding Tommy dinner, running his bath, tucking him into bed in their small Boston apartment, a strange lingering curiosity about who exactly she'd defended on that crowded train car. She had no idea that the old man's son had already heard every detail of what happened, description and all, or that within a week, a man named Vincent D'Amato would track her down through the city's transit authority with a single-minded determination that would upend everything about the careful, exhausting life she'd built for herself and her son. She only knew, climbing into bed exhausted that night, that something about the encounter had felt larger than a simple subway confrontation, though she couldn't yet name what or why it mattered. Megan Walsh was 26 years old, and the small one-bedroom apartment she shared with her son Tommy in Boston's Dorchester neighborhood represented the entire structure of a life she'd built alone, out of necessity, since Tommy's father had left before their son's first birthday. She worked as a medical billing coordinator at a community health clinic, a steady but modest job that covered rent and daycare with almost nothing left over for anything beyond the essentials. Her financial pressure was constant and specific. Tommy's daycare costs, which ate nearly a third of her monthly income, and a standing, private fear that one unexpected expense, a car repair, a medical bill, anything at all, could topple the careful balance she'd built between working full-time and being present enough for her son. Her personal goal, held close and rarely discussed with anyone, was simply to give Tommy a stable, predictable childhood, the kind of steady presence she'd never fully had growing up in a household defined by her own father's unpredictable temper and eventual absence. She'd promised herself, holding Tommy for the first time as a terrified 22-year-old, that she would build something steadier for him no matter what it cost her personally. Her emotional wound ran deep and specific. She'd watched throughout her own childhood adults around her stay silent while her father belittled and intimidated people smaller or weaker than himself. Her mother, her younger siblings, elderly neighbors he considered beneath his patience. Nobody had ever stood up to him. Megan had promised herself, as soon as she was old enough to understand what she'd witnessed, that she would never become someone who stayed silent while someone vulnerable was being mistreated, regardless of what it cost her to speak up. Her moral boundary was simple and unbending. She did not stay quiet when someone was being bullied or diminished, even when speaking up carried real risk, even when exhaustion made silence the easier, safer choice. Her practical skill, sharpened through years of navigating a demanding job and single parenthood simultaneously, was an ability to stay calm and clear-headed under pressure. The same skill that let her de-escalate frustrated patients at the clinic, and the same skill that had kept her voice steady on that crowded subway car. The recurring object she carried tucked into her bag every day was a small, worn photograph of her and Tommy from his first birthday. A reminder on her hardest days of exactly why she kept pushing forward despite the exhaustion. The week before the subway confrontation, Megan had stayed 45 minutes past her shift, unpaid, helping an elderly clinic patient navigate a confusing insurance denial rather than let him leave frustrated and unheard, walking him through the appeals process step by step even though it wasn't technically her job. Nobody had asked her to do that. She'd done it because watching someone vulnerable get dismissed by a system too complicated for them to navigate alone felt like exactly the kind of silence she'd promised herself she'd never participate in. That same instinct, protective, automatic, entirely without calculation, was exactly what sent her standing between a bully and a frightened elderly stranger on a crowded subway car, without a single thought toward what it might cost her or where it might lead. Putting Tommy to bed that night, Megan found herself replaying the old man's expression when she'd asked her name, something searching, almost startled, like her simple act of decency had genuinely surprised him in a way that suggested he didn't encounter it often. Her phone buzzed the following week while she was making dinner. An unknown number, a text message that made her stomach tighten with instant wariness. "This is Vincent D'Amato. My father told me what you did for him on the train last week. I'd like to thank you properly if you'll allow it." Megan stared at the message, unsettled by how quickly a stranger had apparently tracked down her personal number. "How did you get this number?" he typed back. "The transit authority and someone with connections willing to make a phone call," came the reply, disarmingly honest. "I understand if that concerns you. I promise my intentions are simple gratitude, nothing more." Megan set her phone down, weighing genuine unease against a curiosity she couldn't quite suppress, and had no idea yet how completely that single message was about to upend the careful, exhausting stability she'd spent 4 years building for her son. Vincent D'Amato arrived at Megan's apartment building 3 days later, and the sight of him standing in her modest hallway, composed, expensively dressed, carrying himself with an authority that felt entirely out of place against the building's peeling paint, made her regret agreeing to the visit before he'd even spoken a word. "Mr. D'Amato," she said, keeping the door only partially open, Tommy napping in the next room. "I told your assistant on the phone, I don't need anything for what happened on the train." "I know," Vincent said. "My father insisted I come anyway. He hasn't stopped talking about you since it happened." "I did what anyone should have done," Megan said. "Someone was being cruel to an old man. I said something. That's not worth this kind of attention." "Most people don't say something," Vincent said quietly. "That's exactly why my father hasn't stopped talking about it." Megan studied him, composed, careful, radiating a controlled authority that unsettled her more than his wealth did. "Why does a simple thank you require you showing up at my apartment in person?" "Because gratitude that stays abstract doesn't mean much," Vincent said. "I wanted to offer something concrete. Compensation for your time, your risk, whatever would actually help you and your son." He extended an envelope, thick enough that Megan's stomach tightened with immediate, instinctive refusal. "I don't want that," she said, not taking it. "I didn't help your father for a reward. If I take money for it, it stops being what it actually was." Something shifted in Vincent's careful expression. Surprise, genuine and unguarded. "Most people don't turn down this kind of offer." "I'm not most people," Megan said. "I have a son to raise. I'm not interested in owing a stranger anything, however generously it's offered." Vincent studied her for a long moment, something recalibrating behind his composed exterior. "That's a remarkable amount of clarity for someone I've known for exactly 4 minutes." "I've had a lot of practice being clear about what I will and won't accept," Megan said. "It comes with the job of raising a kid alone." Something in her directness seemed to land with more weight than she expected. "Can I ask you something else, then? Not about compensation." "What? Why did you actually step in?" Vincent asked. "On that train. You didn't know my father. You had your own son to think about. Most people calculate the risk of confrontation and decide it's not worth it." Megan considered the question seriously. Because I watched people stay silent around cruelty my whole childhood, and I promised myself I'd never be one of those people. That's not really a complicated answer. It's just who I try to be. Something shifted fully open in Vincent's expression. Recognition maybe, or a kind of respect that went deeper than simple curiosity. My father's build has had elderly residents pressured to sell their homes lately, he said, almost involuntarily, like the words escaped before he'd fully decided to share them. I've been trying to understand exactly why he was targeted that day. I don't think what happened on that train was random. Megan's wariness sharpened immediately. What do you mean, targeted? I don't know yet, Vincent admitted. I'm still investigating. But my father's building has been under pressure from a redevelopment scheme for months, and the timing of what happened to him on that train doesn't sit right with me. That's not really my concern, Megan said carefully, though something in his admission unsettled her more than she wanted to acknowledge. I understand, Vincent said. I shouldn't have said that much. I'm sorry. He left the envelope of money on her hallway table despite her earlier refusal, and Megan noticed it only after he'd gone, chasing him down the stairwell to press it back into his hands before he reached the street. I told you I don't want this. Vincent took it back without argument, something like genuine respect crossing his face. You're the first person in longer than I can remember who's actually meant that. He left without further explanation, and Megan stood on the sidewalk outside her building for a long moment afterward, unsettled by an unease she couldn't fully name. Not about Vincent himself but about the vague, unfinished mention of a redevelopment scheme and elderly residents under pressure. She didn't yet understand how directly that mention would soon connect to her own building, her own son's safety, and a fraudulent scheme far larger than a single confrontation on a crowded subway car. Vincent's investigation into his father's building accelerated over the following 2 weeks. And though Megan told herself repeatedly that it had nothing to do with her, his attention toward her own life became increasingly, unmistakably visible. He requested her number again, not to press money on her this time, but to ask careful, specific questions about her own building's management, her own landlord's recent communications, details Megan answered with growing unease as she began to recognize troubling parallels to what he'd described about his father's situation. My building sent a notice last month, she told him during one call, digging through a drawer of mail she'd meant to review more carefully. Something about a city redevelopment assessment. I didn't think much of it at the time. Can you send me a photo of that notice? Vincent asked, an edge of urgency entering his controlled voice. She did, and his response came faster than she expected, sharp with alarm. Megan, this is the exact same language used in the fraudulent paperwork targeting my father's building. Same phrasing, same city department reference number. Your building's been added to the same scheme. Megan's stomach dropped. What scheme exactly? A city councilman named Peter Marsh has been running a redevelopment fraud for months, Vincent explained. Pressuring elderly and vulnerable residents to sell their homes under false pretenses, using fabricated city assessments to make it look official. My family's organization has quietly protected Marsh for years. In exchange for favors, protection I'm only now understanding I need to reconsider entirely. Your family protected the man targeting your own father's building? Megan asked, disbelief cutting through her fear. Unknowingly until now, Vincent said, voice tight with controlled fury. I'm going to fix that. But Megan, if your building's caught in the same scheme, that puts you and Tommy at risk too. The external consequence arrived faster than either expected. Megan returned home from work 3 days later to find her apartment door unlocked. She was certain, absolutely certain she'd locked it, and Tommy's overturned backpack rifled through on the living room floor, its contents scattered across the carpet, though nothing appeared to actually be missing. Her babysitter, shaken and apologetic, explained that she'd stepped out briefly to take an urgent call, leaving Tommy alone for less than 10 minutes. Someone was looking for something, Megan said, hands shaking as she gathered Tommy's scattered belongings, adrenaline and fear cutting through her exhaustion. In my 4-year-old's backpack. He called Vincent immediately, voice unsteady. Someone broke into my apartment, went through my son's things while he was home with a sitter. Vincent's response was instant, sharp with alarm. I'm coming now. Don't touch anything else. He arrived within the hour, his composed authority radiating through her small apartment as he assessed the scene with a careful, methodical attention that suggested considerable experience with exactly this kind of danger. "They were looking for documents," he said, examining the disturbed backpack. "Probably related to your building's assessment notice. Proof you might have that contradicts Marcia's fraudulent paperwork." "My son was almost alone in an apartment someone broke into," Megan said, fear and fury tangled together in her voice. "Because of a scheme connected to a favor your family did for a corrupt politician." "I know," Vincent said, and the genuine regret in his voice was unmistakable. "I take full responsibility for that connection, however indirect. I want to move you and Tommy somewhere I can actually protect you properly while I sort this out." Megan's instinctive independence flared immediately. "I'm not uprooting my son's entire life because of danger I didn't create." "I understand that reaction completely," Vincent said. "I'm not asking you to uproot anything permanently. I'm asking you to let me keep you both safe while this gets resolved. You keep your job. Tommy keeps his routine as much as possible. I just need you somewhere secure until I understand exactly how deep Marcia's scheme actually goes." Megan looked at her son's scattered belongings at the door someone had forced open to search a 4-year-old's backpack, and felt the careful, exhausting independence she'd built her entire adult life around begin to crack under the weight of genuine, immediate danger. "If I do this," she said finally, "it's on my terms. I keep working. Tommy's routine stays as intact as possible. I am not disappearing into your world completely." "Agreed," Vincent said without hesitation. "Whatever you need." She packed a small bag for herself and Tommy under the watchful eye of Vincent's driver. 20 minutes later, the worn photograph of Tommy's first birthday tucked carefully into her coat pocket, and didn't look back at the apartment she'd called home for 4 years. Whatever came next, there was no simple path back to her ordinary, careful life anymore. The protected residence near Vincent's own home, where Megan and Tommy now stayed under discreet but constant security, became over the following days less a temporary safe house and more a strange, complicated second home neither Megan nor Vincent fully acknowledged out loud. Scene 1 came the next morning, practical and immediate. Megan found Vincent in the kitchen before dawn, attempting with visible uncertainty to prepare something for Tommy's breakfast. "You don't have to do that," she said, taking over gently. "I can handle breakfast." "I wanted to help," Vincent admitted, something almost sheepish in his controlled expression. "I don't have a lot of practice with 4-year-olds. "Most people don't," Megan said, working the pan with practiced efficiency while Tommy sat at the table, watching Vincent with open curiosity. "It's not complicated. Mostly just patience and not taking anything personally when he decides he hates whatever you made yesterday for no reason." "That sounds like most business negotiations I've sat through," Vincent said, something almost like humor threading through his usual composure. Scene 2 arrived 3 days later, an argument sharper than either expected. Vincent announced over a quiet dinner after Tommy had gone to bed that he wanted to arrange for Tommy to be pulled from daycare temporarily, replaced with private, secured childcare within the residence. "Absolutely not," Megan said immediately. "Daycare is the one piece of routine I've managed to keep intact through all of this. You don't get to take that away too. Megan, if Marcia's people are watching for opportunities, then we increase security around daycare specifically, but you don't get to keep expanding what protection means every time you get nervous," she said, voice rising with genuine frustration. "I promised myself I'd give Tommy stability no matter what. Pulling him out of the one normal routine he has left isn't protection. It's just fear dressed up as caution." Vincent sat back, absorbing the force of it, and for the first time actually paused instead of immediately defending his position. "You're right," he said finally. "Tell me what would actually work instead." Megan's anger softened at the honesty. "Increase security around daycare. Don't take it away from him." "Done," Vincent said, meaning it. Scene 3 came on the 7th night, when Megan found him alone on the residence's back porch, a glass of wine he wasn't drinking held loosely in one hand. "My father and I haven't spoken more than a few sentences to each other in almost 2 years, Vincent said, before she'd even asked what was on his mind. "Not since I made decisions about the business that he disagreed with fundamentally. Watching him almost get hurt on that train, watching you defend him without hesitation when I couldn't even manage a simple conversation with him, it's made me realize how much distance I've let grow between us, All in the name of protecting him from choices I made that he never approved of. Megan sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Protection and connection aren't always the same thing, she said gently. Sometimes protecting someone from your choices just means protecting yourself from their disapproval. That's uncomfortably accurate, Vincent admitted. I've told myself for 2 years that staying distant was about sparing him worry. I think it's actually been about avoiding a conversation I'm scared to have. I understand that better than you'd expect, Megan said. Tommy's father left before he was even 1. I spent years telling myself I was protecting Tommy by not talking about it, not letting him ask questions I didn't know how to answer honestly. Eventually I realized the silence was more about protecting myself from having to explain something painful than actually protecting him. He looked at her, something raw and unguarded moving across his face. You keep finding exactly the thing I need to hear. I read people for a living in a way, Megan said. Insurance denials, frustrated patients, small kids who can't articulate what's actually wrong. It's the same skill, just pointed at different problems. They sat in silence that wasn't uncomfortable, the evening quiet settling around the porch, and something passed between them that wasn't yet spoken but was undeniably present. 2 people who'd both learned, through different kinds of fear, exactly how much courage genuine connection actually required. It was Vincent's assistant, Marco, who broke the moment, appearing at the porch door, tablet in hand, expression tight. Boss, he said. We finally got confirmation on the forged documents targeting Megan's building. There's a handwriting match worth seeing. Megan's brow furrowed, following them inside to the residence's office, where Marco displayed the fraudulent redevelopment paperwork alongside a signature sample. Megan studied the looping, distinctive script, something clicking into place with sudden, startling clarity. I recognize that handwriting, she said slowly. I used to work reception at a law office downtown years ago before Tommy was born. I processed intake forms for months. That signature. I'm almost certain I've seen it before on paperwork from Councilman Marsh's office. He used to file zoning variance requests through our firm. Vincent went very still. You're certain? I have a good memory for handwriting, Megan said. Comes from years of matching signatures to intake forms. That's Marsh's own signature, not a subordinate's. He signed these fraudulent documents personally. Vincent's expression went cold and absolute, a realization settling behind his composed exterior with visible, unwelcome weight. That's not just fraud anymore, he said quietly. That's Marsh personally forging documents to steal people's homes, using a scheme my own family has been protecting for years without fully understanding what we were protecting. Whatever fragile calm they'd built over the past week had just shattered completely. The confirmation, once Vincent's investigators cross-referenced Megan's identification against Marsh's known signature samples from public city records, revealed a fraud considerably more personal and deliberate than anyone had initially suspected. He's been running this scheme for over a year, Vincent's cousin Angela explained, laying financial and property records across his office desk. Elderly residents across at least 6 buildings, pressured to sell under fraudulent redevelopment assessments Marsh personally authorized. Your family's organization provided political cover in exchange for zoning favors, never fully understanding the scheme underneath the arrangement. My father built this family's political relationships on the assumption that favors like this stayed within reasonable bounds, Vincent said, voice flat with barely controlled fury. Marsh used that cover to steal homes from vulnerable people, including my own father's building. Including Megan's. Why would he risk exposing the scheme now? Megan asked. If it's been running successfully for over a year. Because your building getting added to the list wasn't originally planned, Vincent said grimly. I think Marsh added it hastily after learning you were connected to my family somehow, hoping the fraudulent paperwork would pressure you into moving before you could dig into what actually happened with my father. The danger sharpened almost immediately. Marsh, apparently sensing his scheme's exposure approaching, moved fast. Megan received a call from her actual landlord, confused and alarmed, explaining that someone claiming to represent the city had visited the building that morning, asking pointed questions about which tenants had recently been in contact with outside parties. He's trying to isolate me before this becomes public, Megan said, adrenaline cutting through her exhaustion. Trying to figure out who I've told what I know. Then we move faster than he expects, Vincent said. There's a city council session tomorrow, a public hearing on the redevelopment fund's oversight. If I expose Marsh's forged signature there publicly with your testimony backing the handwriting identification, there's no room left for him to spin his way out of it. That means my name becomes public too, Megan said, weighing the risk carefully. Connected to this entire situation. It does, Vincent admitted. I won't pretend otherwise. But hiding this evidence doesn't protect you either, not really. It just gives Marsh more time to find another way to silence what you know. Megan considered it, fear and resolve tangled together. Then let's do it publicly. Tomorrow. The confrontation arrived faster than expected, however. That evening Vincent's father called, voice tight with urgency. Marsh just called me directly, he said. He knows Vincent's planning to expose him. He's threatening to release information about our family's business connections publicly, unless Vincent backs off entirely. What kind of information? Vincent asked, already tensing. Enough to complicate things considerably for the whole family, his father said grimly. He's not bluffing, Vincent. He's cornered, and cornered men make dangerous choices. Vincent's jaw tightened, something resolving fully behind his controlled expression. Then he's already decided what kind of man he's going to be in this. I need to decide the same thing. He gathered his senior associates within the hour, laying out the full evidence. The forged signature, the fraudulent building assessments, Megan's identification, his father's account of Marsh's threat, and the room's reaction confirmed exactly how difficult the coming decision would be. Marsh has protected this family's interests with the city for over a decade, argued Enzo Rinaldi, one of Vincent's oldest advisors. Exposing him publicly ends that protection completely, and whatever he releases about our business connections could invite scrutiny this family has avoided for years. And if I don't expose him? Vincent asked. He continues stealing homes from vulnerable people, using a scheme my own family unknowingly enabled. He already tried to intimidate an innocent woman and her 4-year-old son to protect himself. Silence isn't protecting this family at this point. It's just protecting Marsh's ability to keep doing this. There's real risk in what he's threatening to release, Enzo warned. I know, Vincent said. I'm doing it anyway. Megan, listening from the doorway, stepped forward. I want to testify at that hearing myself, she said. About the handwriting, about what happened to my apartment. If you're going to risk exposing your family's connections, my testimony needs to be part of making sure it actually sticks. Megan, Marsh already tried to intimidate you once, Vincent said. Standing up publicly against him carries real risk. Staying quiet carries risk too, Megan said. For me, for Tommy, for every other family he's targeted with this scheme. I'm not interested in hiding from this. Vincent studied her, torn between every protective instinct he had and the plain truth of what she'd said. If you testify, he said finally, you stay under full security before, during, and after. No exceptions. Agreed, Megan said, her voice steadier than she felt. She reached into her coat pocket, fingers finding the worn photograph of Tommy's first birthday, and tucked it carefully into her bag for tomorrow. A quiet, private reminder of exactly why walking away had never really been an option. The city council hearing filled a downtown chamber with officials, press, and concerned residents from across the buildings targeted by Marsh's scheme. A public forum meant for routine oversight discussion, about to become something considerably more consequential. Councilman Peter Marsh presided from his usual seat, composed and unbothered, until Vincent approached the podium during the public comment period, Megan close beside him, the assembled evidence in a folder under his arm. I'd like to address something before this session continues, Vincent said, his voice carrying clearly across the chamber. A pattern of fraudulent redevelopment assessments targeting elderly and vulnerable residents across multiple buildings in this city. Assessments personally authorized by Councilman Marsh. Marsh's composed expression flickered. That's a serious accusation to make in a public session, Mr. D'Amato. It's not an accusation, Vincent said. It's documentation. He nodded to Megan, who stepped forward, laying the forged assessment notices alongside verified signature samples on the podium's small display table. This signature, Megan said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, matches paperwork I personally processed years ago at a downtown law firm, where Councilman Marsh regularly filed zoning variance requests. I have a clear, specific memory of his handwriting from that work. This is the same signature, authorizing fraudulent redevelopment assessments on at least 6 buildings across this city, including my own and Councilman D'Amato's father's building. The chamber's ambient murmur dropped into sharp, listening silence. Marsh's composure cracked visibly. "This is absurd," he said, voice rising. "A private citizen's memory of handwriting isn't evidence. It's evidence enough to warrant forensic verification," Vincent said, voice going cold and absolute. "Which multiple independent document examiners have already confirmed, cross-referencing against 15 years of your filed public signatures. You forged assessment documents to pressure vulnerable residents into selling their homes under false pretenses, Councilman. That's not a private citizen's faulty memory. That's a documented pattern." Marsh's hand moved toward his phone, panic overriding his earlier composure. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under to hit redevelopment targets. I understand you stole homes from people who trusted this city to protect them," Vincent said. "That's not pressure. That's theft dressed up as policy." Marsh, cornered and exposed in front of press and public alike, made one final desperate gambit. "Your own family has protected my position for years, Vincent. In exchange for favors you're conveniently leaving out of this presentation." "I'm not leaving it out," Vincent said, something raw and absolute in his voice. "My family provided political cover for you, unknowingly enabling exactly this kind of fraud. I'm not proud of that arrangement and I'm ending it completely publicly right now. Whatever it costs my family's standing with the city, I'd rather lose that than keep protecting a man who steals homes from people who can't fight back." The chamber erupted into stunned, urgent conversation, press already documenting every word for the following morning's headlines. Marsh, understanding the full scope of what had just been publicly severed, was escorted from the chamber by city security amid mounting calls for immediate investigation. The aftermath fractured Vincent's family's political standing exactly as Enzo had warned it would. The protection arrangement with Marsh's office, built carefully over more than a decade, dissolved entirely, along with several other political relationships that had depended on that same web of quiet favors and mutual protection. "You lost years of political protection this family relied on," his father told him 2 days later, visiting the residence for the first time in nearly 2 years, the reconciliation Vincent had feared unfolding cautiously between them. "I lost protection that let a man like Marsh steal your home out from under you," Vincent said. "I'm not interested in keeping political relationships that only function because they let corruption operate unchecked." His father studied him for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Not quite forgiveness but the beginning of it. "You've changed since the last time we really talked," he said. "I've been trying to," Vincent admitted. "It took watching a stranger defend you on a train, and then watching her refuse to stay quiet about corruption that could have cost her everything, to understand exactly what I'd been avoiding by keeping my distance from you." Megan found Vincent alone in his office that evening, exhausted in a way she hadn't seen from him before, the weight of everything he'd sacrificed visible in his careful composure. "You could have found a quieter way to handle this," she said. "Protected your family's political standing while still stopping Marsh." "I could have," Vincent admitted. "For years I told myself that protecting my family's interests meant protecting our political relationships above almost everything else. The same lesson that let a fraud like Marsh's operate unchecked for over a year, using our protection as cover. Watching you refuse to stay silent, watching you insist on testifying publicly even knowing the risk it carried, you taught me something I should have understood a long time ago." He met her eyes directly. "Protection that requires silence about corruption isn't actually protection. It's just complicity with better manners. I'm not interested in that kind of protection anymore, whatever it costs." Megan was quiet a long moment, weighing everything he'd admitted against the fierce independence she'd fought to protect throughout this entire ordeal. "I need you to understand something too," she said finally. "I'm not interested in staying close to you because I feel like I owe you anything for exposing Marsh or protecting me and Tommy or any of it. I stood up on that train because staying silent around cruelty was never something I could live with. I'm not going to let gratitude replace something that has to be chosen freely, not even for you." "That's exactly what I want you to understand too," Vincent said. "Whatever you choose next, it has to be entirely yours." Marsh's formal arrest followed within the week, the forensic handwriting analysis and Megan's original identification combining into evidence solid enough that his fraudulent scheme collapsed entirely, every targeted building's assessment reversed and its residents formally notified of the fraud. "You didn't have to testify publicly," the investigating attorney told Megan afterward. "A lot of witnesses in your position would have provided a private statement and avoided the exposure. He tried to steal my home and threaten my son's safety to protect himself," Megan said simply. "I wasn't interested in letting that happen quietly, where it's easier for people to look away from." 3 weeks later, Megan sat with Tommy in their own apartment. The fraudulent assessment reversed, the redevelopment threat fully resolved, her building's residents finally safe from Marsh's scheme entirely. Vincent had offered her, more than once, permanent housing near his own home, complete financial support, an end to the exhausting daily balance she'd maintained as a single mother working full-time. She turned it down every time, gently but firmly, exactly as she'd promised herself she would. "You could let me make things easier," Vincent said one evening, finding her at her kitchen table reviewing Tommy's daycare paperwork, back to the ordinary rhythm she'd fought hard to protect throughout everything. "You've more than earned that after everything this cost you." "I know," Megan said. "But this apartment, this routine, this life, it's mine. Built by me for Tommy without anyone handing it to me. I'm not interested in trading that away just because an easier option exists now." "Then what do you want instead?" "I want you in our lives," Megan said. "Not managing them for us. Not providing an easier version of what I've already built. Just present alongside us on terms that actually respect what I've worked for." "Those are good terms," Vincent said, something warm moving behind his careful expression. "I'll hold to them." That evening, Tommy asleep in the next room, Megan pulled out the worn photograph of his first birthday, turning it over in her hands. "I almost forgot why I carry this most days," she said. "Not just for the memory. As a reminder that standing up for what's right, even when it's exhausting, even when it costs you something, it's never actually the wrong choice. That's what this whole thing taught me, watching it unfold from a subway car to a city council hearing." "You taught me that too," Vincent said quietly. "I spent 2 years avoiding a difficult conversation with my father because I told myself distance was protection. Watching you refuse to look away from an old man being bullied on a train, that's exactly the courage I needed to finally have that conversation myself." Megan looked at him. A powerful, complicated man who had sacrificed years of political protection rather than let corruption continue unchecked, who had finally repaired a fractured relationship with his own father because a stranger's small act of decency had shown him what he'd been avoiding, and felt something in her careful, exhausting life finally fully settle. "I'm not staying because you protected us," she said. "I'm staying because somewhere in the last month I found something worth building. For me, for Tommy, with you, built on equal terms, not on debt or rescue." Vincent reached for her hand, deliberate and unhurried, entirely hers to accept or decline. "I know I complicated your independence, the moment I showed up at your door with an envelope you never wanted," he said. "I've thought about that a lot. Whether any of this actually helped you or whether it just handed you a different, more dangerous version of the same problem." "It did complicate things," Megan admitted honestly. "But you also listened every single time I pushed back. That's the difference. You didn't just decide for me and expect gratitude. You let me set the terms even when it clearly would have been easier for you not to." "Then let's keep building it that way," Vincent said, "together on whatever terms actually work for both of us." She closed the distance between them herself, deliberate and certain, and kissed him. The choice entirely hers, made with eyes open to exactly what it had cost and exactly what it had given her and her son in return. Megan still rides the T most days, still keeps that worn photograph in her bag, still believes more firmly now than ever that standing up for someone else, even at real personal risk, even when it would be easier to look away, can change the course of your own life in ways you could never have predicted. If this story stayed with you, I want to know what you think. Was Megan right to get involved defending a stranger on that train, or should she have stayed quiet and kept her son entirely out of it? Tell me your honest answer in the comments and why you believe it. If stories about quiet courage changing everything resonate with you, subscribe. The next one is coming soon.